the value of diversity and inclusion is known in industry over many years, and with lots of efforts in last 2 decades, we somehow managed to get gender diversity to the tune of about 20%, which means there is a long way to go when it comes to diversity and inclusion at workplace. Now let's look at what happens to the gender diversity at workplace. As a community of HR professional as well as the leaders within the organization, we tend to see that two important events in women's life. One, marriage, still our cultural important element, and second, childbirth changes the whole equation. So we have some industries where you see that as high as 25 to 30% of the gender diversity is women. But when you start looking at top down, from the CEO level or from the business unit leadership level towards the entry level, the pyramid is extremely skewed. That 30-35% stuff what we are speaking, it reduces to less than 2% when you start going towards middle management and upwards. And it is the huge loss of opportunity for industry as well as to the professionals in the industry from the kind of value women would have created within the industry. And as I stated earlier, that diversity and inclusion promotes innovation, creativity, team spirit, and helps faster go to market for the organizations. Now if those are the benefits of diversity and you lose that benefit after the employee joins you within, let us say, anywhere between 3 years to 7 years or 8 years, then we are literally shooting at our feet by not putting the practices and procedures and ecosystems which will nurture this creativity, innovation, and the go-to-market acceleration throughout the journey of a woman's career in the organization. So I feel that it's a high time in industry that when we measure things like attrition, things like time to market, things like diversity ratios, I think it is time to look at the sustainability for the diversity. And here I am more focusing on the sustainability of a woman workforce in the organized sector as well as in the inorganized sector. In organized sector, we still have some systems and processes. There has been recent changes in the legal framework to support maternity related benefits as well as the time off. But in the unorganized sector, these things are far from reality. So you can imagine that, first of all, contradiction to the organized sector, participation in workforce by women in unorganized sector is higher. Yeah. But the challenges are even more because the legal framework is not necessarily implemented the way it is supposed to be. There is lack of knowledge for the women with respect to their own rights, and other health related issues as well as the lack of sufficient ecosystem drains the entire workforce. But if you also look at the economic aspect of this, in both sectors, in my opinion, it affects the inorganized sector more, and it affects not to the employer and other organizations. It actually affects the workforce themselves, because at one end they are compelled to work, at the other end they are constrained to work. And NHIDN as an NGO and the important body who influences HR community as well as HR policy building, I strongly believe that this is one area on which we need to work by way of bringing in better policy frameworks, by way of getting very targeted research done, because so far we have not done any research which will very in a concrete way talk about the impact of depletion in return to work for women. There are a handful of organizations in Fortune 500 companies, maybe only the top 20 or top 30, who have some systems and processes, but they also don't necessarily believe that they have got everything right. If those organizations who are progressive in some way believe that they have only just started, you can imagine the rest of the sectors are far from where we all of us want to be. And if I bring some aspect of the Indian labor market with respect to the demographic dividend we have, we run a risk that we may not be capturing that demographic dividend properly if we don't focus on continuity of women at workforce for a sustained period of time, in spite of the life-changing event which takes place in their lives. Okay. We spoke about entry-level success which the industry has got for a couple of decades. When we start looking at mid-management and beyond that, I think the challenge is large. Even in the Fortune 500 organizations, we don't see more than 2.5 to 3% participation at leadership level. And when the overall value of diversity and inclusion is been established, we can imagine the lost opportunity at a leadership level if we don't have the right representation. Statistically, if any particular constituent is less than 15 to 20% in a group, it is considered as underrepresented. And you can imagine if a particular constituent is underrepresented, the voice of that particular constituent will not necessarily be heard, and it may not influence on the decision making process in the organization, which as much is the loss for those individuals and communities, it is more loss for the organizations as a whole. And beyond that, it's a loss to the overall economic output of the organization, the country, and the community at large. And hence we strongly believe that one of the important target we can take as HR fraternity as well as the industry body to try and see how quickly we can get that number to in double digits to begin with, and then can we have that audacious target to keep the leadership representation of women similar to where it is at entry level. You might think that I am daydreaming, but I think some of these dreams are worth pursuing, because in long run it will make a huge difference to the world at large. Now, it's easier to set the target, but going after that is not easy for the women colleagues, primarily because of the two very, very important life events which they go through. I'm not saying that men don't go through those life events, because otherwise it will be an incomplete life event. Having said that, the impact on a woman colleague is much longer, and it is almost life changing. It is life impacting to the male colleagues, but I believe that for the women colleagues, this severity of the change is very high. Marriages, happy moments, everybody is there to celebrate with you, congratulate, all families and friends come together. But then within 48 hours they disperse as well. We don't have the scenarios where earlier, the 5-day marriages were there. At least the fun used to be there for 5 days. Nowadays, in places like Pune, it is 2.5 hours and your job done. But when it comes to other important life-changing event like childbirth for a woman, in my opinion, being a father of two, just the The event itself can be there for 2 to 3 years. Many times the mental and physical preparedness, that's where the whole element begins. Forget about the expectations and the taunts coming from the parents and the in-laws and stuff like that. We can possibly ignore that as much as one can. But the real significant event which one is going through takes good amount of time. The process of conception, childbearing and delivery, and then at least first 3 to 4 years where there is a high dependency of child on the mother. So if you consider this period starting from the mental preparedness perspective, roughly it can be anywhere between 3 years. In some cases it can be 5 years as well, because in modern times with the challenges like PCOD and others, many female colleagues are finding very difficult to go through the pregnancy as smoothly as it was before, and the work life elements are also impacting on them. So if you consider all of this and take a broad segment of 5 years, and you are within that time, you are expected to continue to work, continue to perform, continue to beat the bell curves and those which don't exist. There are expectations at home, there are expectations by the partner in the form of husband, who has changed the role at times. Earlier was a partner and now acting as a demanding husband. All those sorts of things start impacting, and within that, if you expect the woman colleague to perform at her best, continue to excel, take on more responsibilities like leadership roles and stuff like that. I think though we belong to the country where we have always given the status of superwoman-ness to the woman, in reality I do not know how practical it is to expect all this from our woman colleague. But kudos to them. Millions of them have been successful through this journey. 10 to 12 years back, situation was a bit different. We were operating in a relatively joint family sort of an environment. The family ecosystem was large enough to support a female colleague in their work life. But over a period when we have seen migration taking place, where many people came to cities and metros for work, and their extended families and the family ecosystem stayed wherever they belong, which created a huge challenge for the modern society. And in my opinion, the participation rate in workforce for women is declining because of some of these real challenges. But NHRDN, Mums Smile, the tech startups like them, the doctors community, as well as the organization leadership, all of us together can make a difference. We can leverage technology to solve this problem, and it is one of the most important problem I think a modern professional would need to solve. Otherwise, we run a risk of leaving an important constituent away from work, which neither the constituent themselves can afford, nor the industry can afford. It appears that the medical science believes that when a lady goes through the childbearing process and post-maternity, her personality aspects with respect to her emotional intelligence, her ability to multitask, her ability to work with more complex scenarios gets better. And it's for the industry to lose out on those aspects if females don't come back to work after going through the childbirth related process. So I think tech startups, doctor fraternity, HR community from a policy and process perspective, business leadership, all of us and other ecosystem partners, for example, the healthcare, which is not necessarily medical care, but other health associated stuff, things like yoga specialists, things like your meditation and other complementary health service providers. All of those people can come together, but it's not easy. When I stated that multitasking is one of the key challenge for a woman at that stage, you don't expect her to go and find 10 other service providers and work with them. And I think those are the aspects which the tech startups can pick up very well in stitching all of these things together and stitching them together more proactively. So on a click of a button or on a just a wish being asked to a smartphone, if lady is able to deal with many of these aspects which anyways she needs to be more effective and productive in her overall life, I think it will be a great boon and a great leverage of technology, which we should focus on and put to task for us to get benefited. And when I'm talking about technology, there are elements with respect to AI, ML, and this time I'm not talking ML as maternity leave, but ML as machine learning. So those elements will also play a big role, because whatever tech we put together, if that tech is able to learn from the recent experiences and past experiences, can also accelerate the research findings across the world and help come up with solutions which are much more proactive and friendly for the woman to remain at work, and remain at work by choice versus by being forced, either due to economic reasons or family reasons or work reasons. I think it will be the great thing for us to do. I feel that it's very, very crucial for key stakeholders like the medical fraternity, organizations who are NHRDN members, non-members, tech startups, and community at large need to come together on the research associated with sustainable working life for women employees in various organizations. And when I'm thinking about research, I think it is okay if we do research slightly independently, because it may not be practical to do a joint research where all these stakeholders are together. The doctor community can do a research on things like the working mothers, what sort of pregnancy related challenges or issues they are facing. Organizations can look at challenges with respect to return to work. What are the impediments? What organizations can improve to make a scalable work life for a woman colleague? And community at large can look at that, since the family setups have changed, since the migrations have happened, the age elements at which the females are now becoming mothers have changed. So let's imagine that all these three constituents do their research independently, and then professional bodies like NHRD and others can work with tech startups to try and see the data coming out of this research. How do we stitch it together? What are the key insights which draws the interdependence between the stakeholders? And then a solution approach can be looked at. A co-creative solution between all of these parties can come together, where the tech startups can identify the top 3, 4, 5 problems which we can work on to meet this objective of what I earlier stated of, let's say, if there is a 20 to 30% intake of female colleagues joining the industry, how do we keep it sustainable with the back of the research data coming from various sources, enabled by tech, and enhanced for the overall well-being of the community. I have been fortunate to work in Europe for about 9 years and learnt many practices which the organizations there were adopting. And having worked here in India in 2 different stints, one stint before going and one after coming back, has taught me many things which we can possibly learn from. A couple of examples to quote is that in European countries, the maternity leave duration is much longer right up front, and that gives that peace of mind for the female colleague that she is going to be able to concentrate and focus on her new life and the new being in her life. So there is no so-called time pressure, and I think we can definitely implement some of those elements. Similarly, the work-related proactive connects are much better, which I experienced there, whereby even though the person is on leave, the option is given to the employee to remain connected at her will and at her pace with respect to skill development, as well as staying in touch with the teams, joining some of the important events like town halls or team meetings, or for that matter, there are events being organized where a new mother with the kid and a spouse is invited at work, and there are many such colleagues, let's say, who went on leave. So for example, there are 20 colleagues who are on leave. All 20 of them are welcome to come on a particular day in the office, and there is like a small celebration for a few hours. It helps in these colleagues exchanging notes with respect to how their post childbirth life is going, what sort of aspirations they have now, because in many women's life their aspirations undergo a change. So this is a good touch point even for organization to take inputs and amend certain team structures or certain procedural elements. I think we can implement some of these practices. We can also provide additional support by way of sharing a change which is taking place in the organizations, because 1 to 2 years is a large time window within which many things in the organization may have undergone a change. And if we proactively keep employees abreast about it, they will not feel the lack of confidence when they are coming back. Generally what I have experienced and noticed is, if there is a huge gap, then it is almost like a restart of career for an employee. If we are able to make this as more like a pause, and the pause is chosen by the employee versus the employer, the return to work will become a bit more sustainable for the practitioner. Thank you. For us to keep sustainable work life for female colleagues to remain at workplace and continue to grow, in my opinion, collaboration between multiple stakeholders and co-creation of solutions between multiple stakeholders is extremely important. If we look at the first stakeholder is woman herself, and that person has a very, very limited sphere of influence, plus has life-changing elements to look after while trying to resolve the work-related challenges. So in my view, we should possibly keep lesser burden on such individuals, but we have a larger ecosystems in the form of expert doctors, the paramedic ecosystem associated with pregnancy, corporates including the leadership in corporates as well as HR professionals in corporate, the technology service providers who are operating in this area, including the likes of Mum's Smile, and many others who will come through the period, as well as the other social ecosystems who is keen to ensure that in society we have more participation from women to be there at workplace. And if the solutions are interdependent, solutions are scalable for all participants to collectively win, it will make the world of work very aligned to the 21st century aspirations which all the stakeholders have.